Hello, can you see and hear me?
I can hear you.
Can't see you, but I can hear you.
Oh, let me put the video on. That would help.
I can smell you, strangely enough.
You
Oh,
smell me. Oh, right. That my sweet savor.
Oh, I love it. How are you, Robert?
I'm okay. I'm sweetly savoring.
How were your travels?
Oh, it's a bore going back and forth, but then on the other hand, sitting still is also a bore.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So either way, life sucks, you know.
oh my
Oh,
God.
come on.
That's a good way to start it.
I don't
Oh
believe
yeah,
you
I
think
would
that.
start on a high note, you know.
Yeah,
We can
exactly.
only work up from here.
Now, whose eye is that in the background on the wall?
That's Escher.
MC Escher.
Oh, that's by Escher. Oh, right.
Yeah.
No, I've been to his house.
Oh,
No
wonderful.
kidding.
Oh, years and years ago. He lived in a very quiet residential town in the Netherlands called Baarn, spelled Baarn. They have two A's
Mhm.
because they think one A is not enough, you know, what the Dutch. And so he lives in this. It's a kind of bungalow, and
Mhm.
the thing is that he was a very sort of very ordinary person, a suburban type of person. Even in on a beach with nothing on, you wouldn't have looked at him. I hope. At least you, Chris.
Interesting. But did he, well, I mean, was his house sort of ordinary too? He didn't have fine works of art around.
Oh no, he had died already.
Oh, okay, gotcha, gotcha. I don't know.
He died ages ago. The person who's carried on his work in the scientific sense is Roger Penrose.
Hmm.
Professor Roger Penrose of Oxford, who got the Nobel Prize not so long ago. It took long enough. He should have had it years before. But still, if you live long enough, you can either get bashed in the face or bemedaled.
To continue with the vibe that we've.
Or both.
You see, we're coming up one notch. You
Yes,
get a,
that's true.
you
Maybe.
might you might get a medal.
Mhm.
So now let me tell you about the other world contacts, which only occur in my sleep.
Mhm.
And I want to preface it by saying also that I'm by no means the only one who has these experiences because many people in their sleep go what I call dreamwalking to the other world. It's just that they have total amnesia for it
Mhm.
when they wake up and they don't have any idea they've done it. And because I've seen them, I've seen other dreamwalkers sort of going along, like sort of looking like pale ghosts, as it were, approaching the other world. And many of them, this is not a rare thing. It's just that nobody remembers. And I remember a fair amount. I try not to remember because I don't want to, but I've been told I have to. So now this has been going on for about 30 years. I'll just take one step back and say that before this happened, for about 20 years, every night when I would go to sleep, I would be entertained in my sleep by the same thing. It was like a direct feed from a galactic probe that was probing for moons and solid planets. And so it was silent, no sound or anything. It was just this probe going through space, and you'd see all these moons and planets, and some of them were glittering, and many of them were dark and boring. I remember one that was brightly glittering and red, as if the whole thing was made of rubies or something. But uh, and they're always different. New moons, new planets, all different from one another, big ones, little ones. And it was just like being a direct feed of this exploring satellite that's looking specifically for solid objects in space.
Mhm.
I didn't see gaseous things. I never saw stars. It was just these solid objects in space. And um, and so for about 20 years, I would have that every night. That would be kind of like background music, to help me sleep.
Mm.
And I always thought it was strange, but there it was, and I didn't know what it was, but it came every night, and there again, I was rather indifferent to it in the way I was to the spinning cylinder. Sort of slightly annoyed by the spinning cylinder because he was taking up my time. So now that all changed about 30 years ago when I haven't had the direct feed from the galactic probe since then. I suddenly became a dreamwalker. Um, and I didn't really know what was going on at first. It took me a while to get oriented because uh, I'd be in a deep sleep and I would suddenly find myself instantaneously. There's no traveling involved in um, in this other world. And if I were to be awakened, it instantaneously, split second, you're back in your body again,
Mm.
because that's happened many a time over the years. So now, what is this other world thing? Well, I was, I had a guide, a female guide, who always stands behind my right shoulder. And once in a while, she doesn't. Once in a while, she emerges, like when she's giving instructions to one of the what they call the receivers, which I'll tell you what they are in a moment. She's got quite a lot of authority, and she has permission to go anywhere, to take me anywhere
Mhm.
in this middle region. Now, the other world, this all could be fantasy, but I'll tell you why I think it's not,
Mhm.
apart from the fact that I've experienced it. Um, the other world for humans on planet Earth, that is, because there must be many other worlds, um, is divided into three parts. Just as Julius Caesar, in his history of the wars in Gaul, says in his first sentence, which I'm sure you know by heart, Omnia Gallia in tres partes divisa est, which means all Gaul is divided into three parts. That's his first sentence. Just a curious coincidence, because the other world appears, at least for as it appertains to humans after death and before birth, is divided into three parts. Now, the part you absolutely do not want to go to and cannot visit because there's no way out is what we in English call hell. In French, it's enfer. In Italian, it's inferno. Um, the Jews call it Gehenna. It's not Sheol, which is the other world, but not the hell part. The hell part is called Gehenna. The ancient Greeks called it Tartarus, not Hades. Hades is like Sheol. It's the other world, but it's not the hell part. The hell part was called Tartarus, and that's where beings are confined. The Titans are meant to be confined down there. It's always down there, by the way. It's always down there, and it is literally down there, as I'll explain. But in the other world, it's universally called the pit. So that's the general name that everybody uses in the other world, if they know about it. It's known as the pit,
Mhm.
and it is a pit, and you can't get out. Hence, it wasn't possible for me to visit it, nor would anyone wish to, because it's it's reserved for people who are irredeemably evil. And that's a surprising tiny percentage of humanity because um, um, you'd be amazed how many people don't get sent to the pit. No matter how wicked they are, they may have been murderers, done all kinds of terrible things. If they have even any spark left in them, which means they could be, even in theory, redeemable, they don't go to the pit. The only people who go to the pit are the irredeemably evil, because there's no point letting them continue to roam about, because they can't be redeemed. And so I was told that on average, throughout human history, about 5% of people had gone to the pit,
Hmm.
which I think is a very low percentage, and it is, in my opinion, a very low percentage. I was also told that the percentage has gone up in the past 100 years or so because evil has been spreading so much that it had gone up to 7% and it was in danger of reaching 8%, and that this was looked upon as a terrible, terrible crisis by those in charge. So I was given that information. I was also told um, that they try never, never, never to send anyone to the pit. That's looked upon as a complete failure of the system. Every single person who's committed to the pit makes them very, very unhappy, the people who run this enterprise, because they're losing a soul. And their job is to save souls, not lose them.
Mm-hmm.
So they get very depressed by that. Anyway, I was told that the terrible torment that takes place down there is so much worse than anything that's been remotely conceived by anyone here on Earth, that it far exceeds the most fantastic imaginings of how horrible hell could be. It's much, much worse. And it never ends and you can never get out. So that at all costs, I do urge all the evil people who might be watching, which I'm sure is zero for your podcast, if you're very wicked, cool it, because if you're completely wicked, you've had it. But if you're only just mostly wicked, you still have a chance. And I've seen that, what happens to people at that level. I'll come to that. So my guide, well, first of all, when you die, um, you you have all what the near-death experiences describe. You generally go through a tunnel and there's a light at the end, and so all of that. Because reincarnation is the basis of this whole system, you see. We all existed before we were born, and we all exist after we die. And many people become completely, wildly euphoric after they die because they realize they still exist,
Mm-hmm.
which, having been convinced that of the extermination at death theory, which is false. And suddenly there they are, floating up and looking down on their body, and they think, oh my God, I'm still alive. How did that happen? And they become very euphoric. And of course, they don't have any physical illnesses anymore. So there is no such thing as a physical illness in the other world. It's all over. If you were blind, you get your eyes back. If you were deaf, you get your ears back. If you lost your legs in Afghanistan, you get your legs back. You can't get cancer. You can't even have a cold. It's all over. The whole physical thing is all over. But of course, there is a downside to the physical things being over. Nobody eats or drinks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really rotten deal for chefs.
And foodies.
But what does survive is the aroma of food. So
Mm.
the only physical sense, I say physical in quotes, that survives death is a smell, a kind of smell, not the same as physical smell through the olfactory nerves, but still aromas can be perceived. And I think the ancient people, their shamans and seers and so on, who went into trances and learned all the stuff that I'm telling you now. This is not for the first time. It's just rare in our times. They knew all this, and that this was the basis of burning the incense.
Mm.
And why would anybody burn incense either for the gods or for the God? Because I'm Church of England and High Church. They have incense. I used to be the incense boy to hold the frankincense. I used to like the smell of frankincense. I still do. And so, what's all that about? What's the incense for? But you see, you can still smell certain aromas in the other world if you're entirely plasma being. This is an interesting and very weird confirmation of an ancient rite of burning incense, which, and the Catholics all have incense because the Church of England is similar to the Catholic Church. We don't have a pope. Um, I understand in America, it's split into two. It's now split into the Anglican Church on the one hand and the Episcopalian Church on the other. I have no idea what the difference between them is. They used to be one and they split into, I don't know what that means. But they're also known, I think the Anglican Church like to call themselves Anglo-Catholics. They're practically like Roman Catholics, but without a pope. I'm sure this is very boring to most people who are not remotely interested in either of those churches, but still, I mention it just as information. So, because it relates to the incense,
Mhm.
and the Buddhists, they're burning incense the whole time.
Yeah.
You can be totally impoverished, having got a penny to your name, and you'll spend that penny if you're a devout Buddhist buying incense sticks, which you'll take and burn and as you kneel down in a Buddhist temple, which I've seen many times because I've spent so much time in China where this happens every day.
Mhm.
And it was one of my hobbies to go and see all the old temples. I visited 52 different temples in Beijing alone. Some of them weren't even known to exist. I found them.
Wow.
I'm a bit, you might think it's very amusing. My name is Temple.
Yes.
Mm.
And I go to China, I spend all my time searching for temples. No relation, I assure you. And when I go to Egypt, where we've just been sponsoring the cleaning of an astronomical ceiling at the Temple of Esna on the Nile for the past 7 years. Um, when Olivia and I go to Egypt, our Egyptian friends, even if they've known us for some time, they're still giggling and laughing. And when I meet a new Egyptian, they say, "What? You mean your name is Temple? What you're called Temple? Temple is your name." Because this is so, because temples are important for tourism.
Yes.
So I sometimes offer myself as a tourist attraction, but nobody's taken. But I look weather worn enough, don't you think? I mean, and I suppose I could be, uh, given a touch of extra paint here and there but reconstruction and
Some
miss,
spackling.
missing bits replaced, like plants and no, it's terribly funny studying temples when you're called Temple. It never ceases to raise a laugh. And so we were talking about the incense, and um, I'll tell you more about the sense of smell in a moment, but I just want to finish the the bit about the pit. So my guide, this woman, I'm not allowed to see her face, um, presumably because I might recognize her. Anyway, she's dressed very plainly in a long sort of kind of robe, nothing fancy, no jewelry, nothing, just totally plain. She seems to be about 30 years old, but of course that's how she projects herself. She's probably 30,000 years old, and she's a very high-ranking entity. Uh, she has never told me who she is, but she guides me around and speaks to me telepathically. Everything's telepathic, obviously, and Her face is blotted out, but not. You know how in television news reporting you get the face blotted out of somebody who's accused but not convicted of a crime. You get the blotch on the face that looks quite a mess. It's not that kind of blotting out. It's a vacuity. It's a nothingness. There is actually nothing where the face should be for me to perceive. It's there, but I see it as a nothingness because I'm not allowed to see her face. And but she has long hair because I've seen her step forward a few times. And on this occasion, I'm about to tell you about. So she took me down. She said, I'm going to show you how irredeemably evil people are consigned to the pit. Now, I need to explain that they have these automated spiritual robots, you might call them, in the other world, who work in the afterlife, and they're known as the receivers. They're called the receivers because they're always there whenever a new person dies. They usually meet members of the family and or whatever. There's a reception greeting, and there's always a couple of receivers there, standing off to the side. But you don't notice them necessarily because you don't recognize them, and they're kind of weird because they're about between 8 and 10 feet tall, and they look like nightclub bouncers, you might say, because these are big guys. They're all male, and they're by big, I don't mean muscular or fat or anything of that kind. They're just big, present, you know, and they look like it's very obvious that you do not mess with them. And they're completely placid. They never show any emotion because they're not permitted to have any emotion. They're programmed to be emotionless. Otherwise, they couldn't possibly carry out their duties. They'd go mad.
Yeah.
And so these are intentionally programmed, emotionless, plasma automated. Well, you could call them plasma robots, I guess. But they're all over the place. I mean, they don't put themselves forward. They're only there when they're needed. But, you know, there's plenty of them. And their name is the receivers, based upon the fact that they essentially receive souls, although they don't throw their arms around them or greet them or anything. They just stand there silently, making sure everything's going okay. And then they might lead them on from the reception party to their destination. And they make it plain. I'm trying to remember what I've ever actually been spoken to by a receiver, and I don't think so. I think they don't speak, but they make their intentions clear. Well, I don't know quite how. They're very strange to behold, but they all look alike. So they don't. You wouldn't know receiver one from receiver two because they just look like clones of each other.
Dressed the same.
So even the
Yeah.
people that are going to the pit, they all go through this process.
Oh, they've been through the process, but this comes later. This is after. I think that when you get somebody whose rating is that low, they have to convene some kind of tribunal situation
Mhm.
because, you know, the decision has to be made. Is this person truly irredeemably evil? Before they finally, I think there has to be a consensus. Some sort of committee or something has to make this judgment. They can't leave it to a single higher entity to make the decision that that's the end of somebody. It has to be a committee, which I've never seen, and it hasn't been described to me. But I do know it's a consensus decision that takes place after they die and they've been received, which may be quite a horrible experience for them just being received. You may get all sort of demonic phenomena taking place then. I wouldn't know. But they do get a final judgment. But nobody else is judged in a tribunal. They haven't got time for that kind of thing. It's all automated. But the ones who are going to be sent to the pit do get a tribunal, and unfortunately, it seems it's almost always the confirmation of what they greatly and mostly fear, that they're going to have to lose somebody,
Mhm.
because they just hate losing somebody, hate it. And it's like when Jesus was talking about the 99 and the one,
Mhm.
he'd go for the one. This cannot bear, the divine entities cannot bear to lose somebody. That's the worst thing that can happen to them, is that they think of it being as their failure. That's how they view it. So, okay, so I was taken into this cave. It was just like a cave. It was as if it carved out of the solid rock. Of course, there is no rock. This is all plasma. But it was exactly like a cave carved out of solid rock and lit lit by sort of red yellow light, as if it was like flame or something. There was no flame, but I mean, it wasn't. It was a cavern. And I remember remarking upon how the walls appeared to be stone, carved out of stone, as I've seen in Egyptian situations, for instance, underground. But that's what it was like. And so there are these big, hunky receivers there, and several of them, because this is a very serious moment. And two people were being consigned to the pit, lying side by side on two separate beds, with their feet towards the wall and their heads out towards us. She said, I want you to see how this process takes place, and you must tell the public. You have to tell about this. You must tell people. That's the only reason I'm showing it to you, and of course for you to know. But you must tell people about this. My inclination is not to, but she keeps telling me I have to tell people. Most insistent that people have to know, the public, I mean. It doesn't matter about me knowing. It's as if I know all this stuff anyway. But she's telling me I have to communicate this. It's very important that people know how things really work. An example of reports which I believe to be false are those by Robert Monroe.
Hmm.
Um, I read his books, thinking this will be interesting, fill in some of the gaps in my knowledge, and all of it struck me as false notes. I don't think that he is faking it. He just got it all wrong. I can tell you based on my experience, all of the Robert Monroe books are wrong. They
Interesting.
don't have that much attention to individuals, with people sitting around and discussing their future lives in that kind of detail. There's no time for that. He exaggerated that, whether knowingly or no unknowingly. I have no idea. I'm sure he was a very nice man and he meant well. I'm just saying that I don't look upon his reports as accurate. Others will disagree. So, so now we're back in the cavern, and the these two people are lying there, sort of strapped. They're strapped their limbs. In other words, they're bound, as it were, tightly wound round them. Each one separately is a giant serpent, and then its head is disproportionately large. The head is off to the side of the person's head, with incredibly sharp teeth, and is devouring the person psychically. I mean, the person experiences himself as being devoured by this serpent that's got him in its coils. And the they had been put that place there by the receivers who brought them in, who carry things and perform all these kind of manual functions. And I remember I'm standing here, and the woman is beside me, and the two people are sort of like that, not far away. I'm just a couple of feet away from them, and watching them. And then beyond, there's a couple of very grim-looking, very particularly grim-looking receivers who seem to be even taller than usual. That may have been my heightened imagination. They looked like receivers. I mean, they obviously were. No emotion of any kind. That's the fundamental thing about them. They never show any emotion. You see, they're doing their job. They're programmed only to do their job, not to feel anything or to make any kind of judgments. They're completely just automatons.
Mhm.
And and so then there these two kind of like metal windows slide away, and the wall beyond the feet of the two people who are side by side, the two holes are revealed in the wall, and you can see into them that it leads to some kind of chute. This is eerily like the kind of experience you have in a crematorium, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's no flame or anything.
Mm.
And so then they they kind of tilt the beds, and these two men with their wraparound serpents slide down the chutes, the brief chutes into the big chute, and they plunge down into the depths. That is called the pit because it is in the depths. And just so that I knew more about what this really meant, my woman transported me through the imaginary wall to where we were hovering directly above the descending chute so that I could see down the chute. She said, "We can't go down there, but I just want you to see
Mm-hmm.
how far down this chute goes." And it's kind of lit a bit along the way. So it wasn't just blackness.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the chute as far as you could resolve with whatever kind of eye I was using, some kind of spiritual eye, I guess. And it looked like it was miles and miles down. You couldn't see the bottom. It just narrowed to the point where you couldn't see that it was a chute any longer. And she said it goes into the uttermost depths, and there's no escape. It's the ultimate confinement. Nobody can ever escape. And I said, are they being devoured by constantly, forever by their serpents? Oh, well, those serpents are just temporary. She said, when they get down there, they're being devoured by many creatures. And apparently, what happens um, when they get really down there is for the rest of eternity, or whatever, however long eternity is, um, they are constantly conscious of being devoured by other creatures. The creatures that would most horrify them, you know, sort of insects and snakes and all that kind of thing, all eating them. And so the ultimate horror is to feel yourself being continuously devoured, but then growing back so that you continue to be continuously devoured. The horror of yourself being devoured forever. Some kind of awareness of this process must have been behind the legend of Prometheus, because he was chained to a rock. An eagle came. In fact, the earliest form of the myth has something else that's not an eagle. I can't remember what that is just at the moment. This myth's something that goes way back before ancient Greece because it survives also in the Caucasus, um, and which is where Prometheus was meant to be. So the eagle comes and devours his liver and then flies away again. And then the during the day, the liver grows back. Strangely enough, livers do grow back. If you cut a piece out of the liver in an operation, it will grow back to the original size within 7 days.
Wow.
I've been told that by a liver surgeon.
Hmm.
It's quite fantastic. The liver is a kind of supernatural organ. And so then the eagle comes back and he eats the liver again while he's conscious and he watches the eagle eating him. So I think it's the same thing. You see, the ancient peoples had more direct contact with these kind of experiences that I'm relating to you because they were shamans and seers and they did this all the time.
Mhm.
And I suppose they were fed by the local people. They didn't have to go out for a job and they might have a hut in a cave and didn't have to pay rent. Who knows? Or they were priests living in temples. They would come with the temples again. And so they must have known all this kind of stuff that I'm telling you and embodied it in the very archaic myths that survive. So by the time classical Greek writings were coming along, these guys were still mostly very far in the past. But the knowledge was preserved by some of the priests, uh, and it must have been. And a lot of it to today, as with, for instance, this business of burning the incense. So then the woman said to me, um, "You must tell people about what I've shown you. I've shown it to you for a purpose, specifically so that you tell everybody. Everybody must know that this is what happens." I said, "Well, what about the ones who aren't quite irredeemably evil?" And so she later showed me what happens with them. So now that's all I intend to say about the pit.
Mhm.
Now that's the part of the other world that people intuitively know the most about because there is a kind of archetypal fear and dread of hell, which I think goes back as an ancestral memory hundreds of thousands of years through our caveman days and so on, uh, that we've always somehow known through the shamans that this was what happens if you're really bad. And that fear exists today. You get look at all the horror movies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
People are at some subliminal level deeply aware of this great fear that they could go to the pit. But that's enough about the pit. So now, what are the other two portions of the afterlife? I guess we use that term, or the other world, we can call it, which is an entirely plasma world. So the there's the higher part, which is what we call heaven. Now, I wasn't taken there. Uh, Casual tourism is not allowed, but everything's wonderful in there, and it's very light, but it's not just people sitting around enjoying themselves. A lot of work has to get done there, and that so I'm now going to tell you about where between 85 and 87% of humans go when they die, and that's the middle regions, because only about 5% of people go to heaven because they're really good, saintly people. And a lot of those are people who die young. You know, we often say, "Oh God, she was too good to live. She died young because she was just too good for this world." And that is often true. That there's no point them going on living because they're completely good. So, and they're not turning bad, so they might as well go back to where they came from. And there's no point in their remaining here. I do believe, on the basis of what I've learned, and this was not my inclination before, I do believe that these tragic deaths, as we view them, of people who we call too good to live, so they're always the saintly people who die young. It's for that very reason that they die young. It's bad for those who, like us, who are left behind. I've known some. I knew a young girl whom I used to visit, who was bedridden for her life. She had the most terrible illnesses, and she died young. But she was like an angel, and we've all known children, mostly girls, who've been angelic, truly angelic. You must have known some, even if only in your childhood. And they are the ones, they make a large proportion of the 5% of humans who go direct to what we call heaven. There are much fewer adults because, we're fighting against the evils of this world, and not everybody remains saintly. So it's quite difficult to qualify for going straight to heaven. Maybe the nuns and the monks think they do, but I have doubts about the the monkish and nunnish lives. I had a girlfriend who became a monk, a nun, and a very close friend who became a monk, both in closed orders. So I have direct knowledge of this. Anyway, the middle regions are universally called the gray regions. The reason being that you don't have perfect light there. You have different gradations. Now it's a huge uh, place. It's got hundreds of millions or billions of people in it. Well, I sometimes jokingly say it's got billions of dead people. Well, of course they are dead people from our point of view, but they don't think they're dead. Well, they know they're not because they're still alive, aren't they?
Mhm.
So when we speak about dead people, we're actually incorrect in every instance, because everybody who has done what we call dying is very much still alive, somewhere, doing something in some level or another. And those of us who are very fortunate have never met one of the irredeemably evil ones. That would be like a mass killer and that kind of thing.
I was thinking like Jimmy Savile
Oh, yes, definitely.
or Pol
Oh,
Pot or
down
Vlad
there.
Taylor.
Those kind of people, yes, absolutely, absolutely. They are really irredeemably evil. Yes, that's a good example. You can be quite sure, because I've never met anybody remotely that kind of bad in the middle regions. And so then I've mostly spent my time going to these middle regions, which they call the gray regions, and they are artificially constructed. This is like a huge artificial hollow sphere. Um, it's not so easy to describe, but it's covered by a dome. You see, it's enclosed. There's no sun, there's no moon, no stars, no sky. There are no clouds, there's no weather, and there's no rain, and there's no fog, nothing. But there is ambient light, you could describe it, evenly spread light emanating downwards from this dome. Now, the 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 gray regions seem to they have so many regions and so many levels. I would say it's got to be at least 1 million levels. So I've only, even though I've been going there every night for 30 years, um, it's only a tiny fraction that I've seen. The only regions, because they seem to separate out people of different cultures and languages. I've only ever been to the English speaking and a bit to the German speaking um, gray sections of the gray regions. I've never been to a French section or a Chinese section. And but I was taken by my guide specifically walking along as if on a kind of featureless plain. and we came upon a walled city, like an old ancient walled city, um, and with a huge gate in it. I would say, uh, judging in terms of Earth experience, it was as if the gate and the wall were maybe as far away as the other side of a football field from me. And we couldn't go in. I said, "What's that?" Because just beyond the gate, I saw a giant mosque, um, looking very like the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, really huge. And I said, "What's that?" She says, "We call that the Mosque of Entry." She said, "All those people there you can see going through the gate, they're all very devout Muslims. And and they don't want to be with other people. They only want to be with each other. And they want to be in a Muslim heaven, which is what they think it is. So we cater to that. Um, she didn't use the word cater. Um, and she said, so we've constructed this place ever since there were these Muslims, and and in order to make them feel happy and that they're at home and content, and not get them all anxious and worried. When they go through the gate, they enter this gigantic mosque. And they think, ah, you see, everything we thought is true. We're being brought into the heavenly mosque. And in a sense, they are. They're being brought into their heavenly mosque. And this has all been done to make them just be happy and get on with being Muslims together, which is all they want because they don't want to have to, in the other world, mix with um, um, unbelievers. You know, I'm talking about the very devout Muslims.
Hmm.
I don't know if any Muslims who aren't devout don't go there. I wasn't told any of that, but it's the ones to whom it really matters.
Mhm.
Their belief is so ferocious in the type of thing they've been told that this is their paradise, you see. And they enter their paradise through the Mosque of Entry. I thought that was a very clever arrangement. She said, they absolutely do not want to mix with anybody else, so we've given them their own heaven. And she said, you must tell people this. And it's not the only heaven that caters to a particular type. We've got heavens for other groups of believers who have another system there.
Atheists?
What?
Atheists?
We never discussed atheists. So back to the gray regions. Now, what happens about the transition? First of all, the receivers do bring them across whatever it is they bring them across, and I don't know what that might be, to the entrance to the gray regions, which is a kind of vague horizon-y type thing. And that's where you see the other dreamwalkers coming in, like ghosts, all in the same direction, heading into the gray regions, where they're going to have adventures in their dreams, but they're never going to remember a thing about it. And thousands and thousands, it's very common. Lots and lots and lots of people do this. I'm just one of the few who can remember any of it and tell you, it's not just me. It's many people. I'm not saying it. Many people have a special guide who stands behind their right shoulder and shows them things. I'm just saying many people visit and interact with these, quote, dead, unquote, people. Many. And so what happens is it's all automated. You have a frequency. Everybody has a frequency, which is how good you are in terms of your character. And it's very precise numerical frequency. And the levels, and there may be more than 1 million of them, of the gray regions are by frequency, descending, this ascending. And the higher your frequency, you go to the top and it's very light. If you have a very low frequency, you go towards the bottom and it's quite dark. And it's automated so that you go to the level that is your frequency. And the only place you can raise your frequency or lower it is on Earth. Because once you're in the gray regions, you can't change frequency. You have to wait until you're reincarnated and have another go.
Hmm.
And if you're very good and saintly, your frequency go way up and you go to a much better region next time, or the reverse. And so that is an automated process. It's only the exceptions, like in the case of my mother or of the irredeemables, where you actually have to have some kind of intervention. It's very, they try to make that as little as possible because, it's too much time and manpower. And I don't know who the counselors are because I've never seen them, but I think they are volunteers. There is a group called the Volunteers in the heaven part who are Earth observers and working for Earth. And so the placing of you in your level is an automated thing that you're escorted by the receivers and you're left there, and there you are with other people of your frequency. It could be anybody. Very rare that you would
So
know any of them.
it sounds like not much changes actually once you go to this place, except that you can't eat or drink, have sex, or evolve. So that's what is there?
You're just waiting.
You're just waiting. Interesting. Until you choose to reincarnate.
So it
Interesting.
is a choice, though. You
Oh, I
you
don't know. I think some people are told.
Hmm.
There are the people we call the hurlers, the ones who are obsessed with they have to get back right away, and they're in sort of like groups, clumps of them, on the edge of a precipice, looking down. Oh, this is the image one has. I don't know if it's a real precipice, but this is the image they have, and they're all these hurlers, and they're all along the edge of precipice, eager to jump. They want to jump. They want to get back to Earth. And they won't talk to you. And I've got to get back. I've got to get back. Not because they miss anybody, because they want the physical pleasures that they want to have again.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. And they're all quite hopeless cases. And they're looked upon with great disdain by everybody else. Oh, God, those hurlers again. Um, and uh, I think sometimes they do just hurl themselves off the edge into space. I don't know. But they're known as the hurlers, and there are a fair number of them, people who simply can't bear to leave the physical pleasures of the earth behind and just want to go back, and it's all they can think of. Obsessed. And there's one other type of obsessive, they're really very vulgar. They're called the humpers. What you get is, and they are the only dead people I've ever seen who are naked. Actually, it's not true that they're all clothed. The humpers are not. And you get a mound of them, like about 50 of them,
Mhm.
all together in a kind of mound of writhing people who are all humping, literally, imagining having sex. And which is why they're unclothed. It's not working out very well because there's no genitalia. They can't, but they're going through humping motions. It's the most disturbing sight to have 50 naked people uh, fruitlessly humping in a great uh, mass of just these obsessed people who are so obsessed by sex that that's all they can think of. But they're not like the hurlers who want to just throw themselves back. The humpers are determined to be able to just convince themselves that they're still being sexual.
Hmm.
It's a terrible thing. Nobody pays. Well, they don't want to pay attention to them. It's a very disturbing sight, and they try to avoid the mounds of humpers that you occasionally encounter.
And it's men and women?
Well, I didn't examine closely enough to know. I mean, it's just people. I just wanted to go away. I didn't.
And did this happen in the public square or just around
Oh,
like
everybody could see. Yeah, yeah. So that's just a region. Everybody avoids that region because there's humpers over there.
that side of town? It's strange because I'm just being put face to face with all of these ideas that I had about what happens after you shed this body, and it seems like you just kind of go into another body. Like it seems like it seems as dense as the physical world that we're dealing with, just
Yeah,
without.
you're right. The some groups of people, like the Theosophists, for instance, would call it the etheric body.
Hmm.
This is the etheric realm, the gray region, which is not the real spirit. The spirit is higher. The Egyptians had this all figured out. They had the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak, and the Ak could be glorified into becoming a star. Several different types of soul. The etheric body is is a more of a material type of plasma. Uh, I mean, a pure plasma body would just be a glowing orb.
Hmm. Yeah. So
Uh, so you're right about this. I should have made that clear. I don't want to become too complex about it, but I wasn't told this. I just understand it from what I know generally about plasma and so on, that what's going on in the in this level, it's all the etheric level, the etheric plane, all this gray region stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, the heaven is not etheric. It's
But
higher
that's the
realm.
system. And so I looked around and I said, this is an artificial construction here. I mean, what I'm seeing is like a huge concrete casting. This whole middle region is constructed. It's not just floating around in space. The bottom of it is a solid concrete basement. I could hardly believe my eyes because I thought, this whole thing is built. So now I'll take you up to the top level of the middle region. It's completely covered by a vast dome, from which light is uniformly being emitted, and there's no day or night. It's constant. Now, you can't see the sky. There's no sun. There's no moon. There are no stars. It's just this dome emanating light downwards, and there's no weather, no clouds, no rain. There's nothing like that. It just comes down, and this light goes down, and it gets darker and darker as it goes down a million levels. And I realized that this whole thing is inside a hollow sphere. So it's like a moon or a planet that's hollow, and everybody's in there. So it's been constructed. This is not natural. It's been constructed, and this raises all kinds of questions. By whom, when? I mean, is this whole thing like we're all on a stage show? Is this so? In other words, is life really life, or is it an enactment? I have a lot of trouble thinking about this. What does it really signify? And you see, the people in the middle region they're not thoroughly alert.
they're semi-asleep. They're kind of slumberous. Sleep is sort of half awake, as it were. They're not really very sharp, and they're not thinking straight. They're just being and kind of in an in-between, slightly twilight world. That's why it's called the gray regions, because it is kind of twilight world, and they're just waiting, and they have various activities which I'll describe at the different levels, and they do quite a lot of things, but they can't actually accomplish anything. They can't accomplish anything. And you see, and there's no concept of sexual reproduction in the other world. So there are no genitalia on dead people. And although, so their projections are from their imagination. It's like everything comes out of imagination, the power of imagination. And individuals can project images of themselves, which they themselves create through their imagination, and they generally tend to look like they're about 30. And the women, even though they don't have the physical anatomy of a woman, still have very feminine forms with busts, even though the breasts are non-functional. In other words, they would not be used to produce milk for babies. But they keep the traditional feminine form out of habit or for aesthetic reasons or whatever. And gender is incredibly important. There are very, very sharp distinctions between male and female gender in the other world, even with the higher entities. And it gets even more pronounced with the higher entities. And there's no underlying physical anatomy or sexual aspect to any of this, which is interesting because it shows that gender transcends sexual form that we have here on Earth. And, all kinds of different sexual variations occur here, but there's only two genders with dead people and with higher entities, and they're masculine and feminine. And it's a sort of yin and yang type thing, which seems to be a universal principle. And so, the angels, they're very, very, angels are tricky characters. I've only ever interacted with one. He was very nice, but the thing is they're very powerful and everybody's pretty scared of them. And they are not anything remotely like us. They're totally non-human in the way they think and the way they feel. They're full of compassion and all of that, but they're very, very practical. And they never let sentimentality get the better of them. And they're very aloof in a way that they don't necessarily intend, but they just are. And everybody avoids them because you don't want to get mixed up with an angel because they're so weird, and it's easier to just avoid them, because you don't really know how they're thinking, or we're not really qualified to deal with angels, frankly. It's as simple as that, because they're a different species, completely different species, and nothing like us, even though they may look like us or project that kind of look of being human. They may even project wings. I don't know. I've never seen wings on anybody, but I think they're entirely symbolic. But I have had a contact with one angel, but I was not permitted to see him. We spoke to one another. That's a very interesting and long story. It has nothing to do with astral travel. And so these are some of the fundamentals. Now, the higher regions, which we could call heaven, all that's a very inadequate term, or the regions of light, are somewhere you can't just go as a tourist. That's not permitted. And
And so I haven't been taken on a tour of heaven. I've been forced to go on tours of the middle region every night for 30 years. And I've been told specifically it's because I have to learn about it and become intimately familiar with its denizens, the people who are there of the different levels. I have to get to know them and know what they're like and what it's like. Now, when I said that they get a bit groggy, after about maybe 100 years of Earth time, that kind of period, or sometimes earlier, they basically go into a kind of hibernation because they realize they're not achieving anything, and they've got pretty bored, and it's easier just to go to sleep. And so they basically hibernate until it's time for their next incarnation. And this brings us to a very strange thing involving a television series. Some things come out in film and television which are higher knowledge that's being fed to the public as fiction. And this was the case with a very interesting science fiction television series called Fringe. There were several things about Fringe that were true, presented as fiction. But the one that struck me the most is that in this series, they have people going into amber, as it was called, where they become immobilized and they hibernate, and they're surrounded by this solidified stuff that crystallizes, and they're basically frozen. It's like being bees in amber, going into amber, they call it. And that was in the series, but I've seen it in the other world. I mean, it really happens. And I had a very bad and disturbing experience that brought this home to me. Because, you mustn't mess with experimenting or wanting too much to find out things out of idle curiosity. You have to have a reason to want to know, otherwise you get into trouble, and a good reason. And I'm a 17th century historian, among other things. And I've written a whole 3-volume work of 750,000 words on the trial and execution of King Charles I. In fact, I'm a direct descendant, as it happens, and I didn't know this at first, of one of the people who signed his death warrant. How much coincidence is there in that? And so I'm particularly interested in the mid-17th century period. And some of these guys were of particular interest because they're very, very interesting people. And so I decided to try to contact one of them. Big mistake. Oh, no, don't do that. Nothing happened to me that was bad, but what happened was I was sort of raping the system. So this guy suddenly woke up, and he's surrounded by, like, ice. And I pressed a trigger and forced him to awaken, and he'd been asleep for at least 250 years, frozen in this hibernation. And what I could see, I was allowed to witness this process, if only to teach me not to do this again. The stuff he was frozen in kind of started cracking up like ice cracks up when you smash it on a frozen lake top or something. It started shattering, as it were, and coming off in chunks around him, and his head emerged. And I saw him waking up and opening his eyes and wondering where he was and what's going on, and coming out of a kind of stupor. And I got really worried that I'd basically gone against the rules, not intentionally, but, one should not interrupt the normal process with this guy. So I immediately stepped away from that, and I presume he went back to sleep. I hope he did, because it was very disturbing for him and confusing. I didn't particularly hurt him or anything, but one should not interfere with these things. And anyway, I learned my lesson. And but I did see the shattering of this ice-like stuff where they go into amber, just like in the series of the science fiction series. So I don't know where the writers of those scripts got this from, but what I have discovered is that many of the strange things I've seen and experienced on these astral travels, and it is what the Theosophists call the astral realm, of course, the middle regions. A lot of these things turn out to be things that ancient peoples knew very well, and which I had dismissed when reading ancient philosophy, mythology, and all that sort of thing. A lot of stuff which I thought was nonsense, I now realize is completely accurate to a most astonishing and almost terrifying degree. And what this suggests to me, I think almost proves to me, is that in antiquity, people relied so much on seers and shamans who went into trances and went on night journeys, like the kind of thing I'm doing, but they did it by trying to initiate it for themselves. Who knows, maybe with psychedelics or whatever means they used. That, in fact, the things I'm telling you about were well known for tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years by the shamans of early humans, even in the cave-dwelling times, certainly in all the historically recorded religions. I've been really shocked at how precisely accurate some of the weird things that religions have related are completely accurate to the most astonishing degree.
What about plasma beings? I think you've referred in our previous interactions to the idea that you have or could interact with plasma beings.
Oh, yes, but not in the middle regions. I do that while I'm here. I had some extremely important interactions when I was flying to Singapore at 38,000 feet or whatever it was. And one of them came into the plane. She was a young woman, a higher entity. And I was asleep, and she bent over. I could see her in my sleep, bending over, because she's about 8 feet tall. You know, these higher entities are always tall. And she kissed the top of my head and woke me up. But I could still see her, but telepathically. And she was very interesting. She told me her name. We had a very long conversation. I mostly asked her about their language that they have. She came from a particular type of higher being, and I was interested in the fact that they can't pronounce hard consonants because they have no teeth, you know. Because I'm interested in language. You know, I studied Sanskrit and many ancient languages, and so I'm interested in language to an extent that most people aren't, frankly. And I'm interested in language structure and all that. In other words, I'm no good at picking up languages by sound. I can't speak every European language as I go around and order food in Korean and all that kind of thing. I'm not that kind. I'm a sort of language studier type thing, you know. And so I guess it's because of studying Sanskrit, I got really deeply involved in linguistics, frankly. I was a sole student, you see, my professor, just him and me. But sometimes the linguists, the much older linguists, you know, would come in. They're doing their PhDs, and they need 6 weeks of Sanskrit to, you know, because they've done their old church Slavonic and every language you could think of, and maybe even studied Hopi, one of the world's most interesting languages. But then they would be told, well, you have to do some Sanskrit. Oh, but I've done my Avestan. Never mind. You have to do Sanskrit. Oh, no, please, not Sanskrit. Anyway, they would come in reluctantly, and then they'd leave again. And so I was, the only other students I saw were 10 years older than me, who, you know, they were studying medieval French next. To become a professional linguist, you're really slopping around everywhere.
So you're talking to the plasma entity about language.
Yeah. She was fascinated. She was, she answered any question. She was a very innocent, sweet, delightful girl, and she said that my wife and I were flying to Singapore together, and she said to us, but to me, my wife is still asleep. I asked my father if I can go into the plains and study humans. He reluctantly agreed, and she said, I go into the plains. She entered the plains and was walked down the aisles and studied the people. But she said, but most of them are all dark. And she said she was very delighted this time because Olivia and I had light. That's why she kissed me on the head. I said, you mean we're the only people on the plane who have any light? She said, everybody's dark except for one other man way at the back of the plane because we were going business class. It was on business. She said, there's one man at the back who's glowing a bit, and he might, if he continues along that path, he'll glow more and more. She said, apart from him, who's quite faint, you and your wife are the only people who have any light. Everybody else is completely dark. And she says she gets pretty depressed going into the plains and studying the humans because there's almost never anybody there that she's looking for people who have some light, you see. And so she was glad that we could have that conversation. It went on for ages, and this is entirely telepathic, of course. And I learned a lot from her. She lives in the atmosphere, the high atmosphere. Her type live in the high atmosphere. She said, it's very interesting what she said. Said, do you mean you live up at yeah, she says, we live at this altitude. At the bottom of where we are is where all these planes go. In other words, they're sort of 40,000 feet and more. And I said, do you really like being up there? Oh, yes. I said, it must take you a long time to get anywhere. Oh, no. We anywhere we want to go, we're there instantly. But she said, I'm really curious what it's like to be down on Earth. I said, oh, you mean you've never been there? Oh, no, we can't go down there. I said, you mean that you're higher entities and you've never been to Earth? She said, we can't go down there because of the lizards. That was her language. She said, and the lizards get worse all the time, and we used to be much lower. In fact, I used to be able to come to hilltop height. And I think that's when they were interacting on the tops of all the big structures and things with the shamans. But she said, we've been driven up higher and higher over time because the power of the lizards is so great. And so what I want more than anything is to be able to stand on the surface of the earth and watch the sunset and see the trees and see what you're experiencing. And she said it was the first time she'd met an underworker. She called me an underworker. And she was going to go back and tell her father, all excited. Then, because you see, they can't come to the earth because the power of evil is so great because they're completely good, these guys. I guess they're sort of maybe at the angel level. Who knows? But I said, are there other beings who live a bit lower down in the atmosphere? She said, oh, yes, there are some at the cloud level, but, they're just sort of not very interesting. I mean, she didn't derogate them or anything. She didn't say it like that. It's me talking. She implied that, yeah, sure, they're there and they're very nice, but we don't see much of them. And so she was completely a plasma being, and she had, well, I guess I'll have to tell you what she looked like. It was very striking to see the first time ever. She had long arms and legs, and in the middle of each limb was like a neon light tube glowing, which was her plasma. And she had projected this form that was as close to being a human girl as it was possible for her to get. But she was a glowing plasma being, but glowing brightly. And she was trying to be pleasant looking, so that I would not be frightened, and also that I would like her, because she wanted to have a human friend, even if it was only for half an hour. You see, it was considered, her father had allowed her to do this in the hope that one day she might meet somebody that she could actually talk to. So this is a big plus from her point of view, because she got to talk to somebody. She said, "You are so brave to actually go and live down there." She said that she didn't know anybody who would dare. So that was a rather depressing thing to realize, that the power of evil has become so strong on the earth, from what she called the lizards